This podcast is brought to you by Voice and Vision, bringing help, hope, and healing to individuals, families, and communities affected by mental illness, addictions, and disabilities in southeastern Pennsylvania.
Welcome to Untold Valor, a podcast with a unique focus on veterans, featuring stories of courage, recovery, perseverance, and strength. Listen to hear veterans share their perspectives on what it's like to battle mental health challenges, combat addictions, and overcome other adversities unique to those who have served.
Excited to be back once again on Untold Valor with another fantastic guest and story to talk about this week. We are joined by Darrin Henry. He is a staff sergeant and medic in the Pennsylvania National Guard and owner of Barracks Baristas Coffee Company. We're going to talk about his story, his journey along the way from mental health and issues and things of that nature, and what his company is all about. So really excited, looking forward to that. Reverend Ben's with us this week as well. So let's dive in and get started. Reverend Ben, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Can't wait to hear.
I know. I'm looking forward to it. Me too. I'm looking forward to it. Now, Darrin, we can welcome in. This is good, sir. Good to have you here. I got to tell you, this is really interesting to me too, because I used to own a coffee company as well. So I'm looking forward. It was many years ago, but I'm still looking forward to having this conversation and chatting with you. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that you owned a coffee company prior. It almost kind of seems like the staple business for veterans to kind of jump into as far as their entrepreneurial journey. It's a very, I hate to say it's a saturated market, but with a $60 billion a year industry, I'm not asking for a whole percentage. I'm just asking for a fraction.
Right, right. I'd be happy with 0.25% of 60 billion somewhere. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And enough to keep the family living, and happy.
Exactly. Well, it's pretty interesting stuff for sure. So let's get started as we usually do here on the podcast. I'd set people up to just tell us a little bit about you and how you got to the service and just kind of your time and experience in there, and then what, how that worked for you, the transitioning, all that good kind of stuff. And we'll just work our way through it. But first, just tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, my name is Darrin Henry. I'm working on 16-year veteran with the Pennsylvania Army National Guard predominantly. I've done my entire career as a medic. Went to Fort Sam Houston in 2009. That's where we did our medic training, and then jumped into the field artillery. That was my first unit, 777s, so the howitzers. I loved that. That was my favorite unit I've ever been in. Jumped around to a couple other units, did a tour with an infantry unit, and then jumped over to schoolhouse, so training medics, and then I ended up at aviation, which is where I currently am right now.
Gotcha. Okay, and of course, Reverend Ben, I know that speaks to you as a medic as well as a corpsman. So
very, very much so. I also was, I guess you would call, I was with the grunts. I guess with the Army calls infantry. I was with the 0311s, and I was a frontline corpsman. But I joined the Navy because I didn't want to do that, but that's what I ended up doing anyway. And I'm glad that I did.
Exactly. So, Darrin, we got a little bit of background from you there. So what we like to talk about is, and I'm reading here in your bio and discussion topic, that obviously you went through some mental health issues of your own. That's the focus of the podcast, is helping veterans, whether they're transitioning, back out of military into the civilian life, or it's been a number of years that they've been out of the service and they're still maybe struggling with PTSD or any kind of issues that, plague our veterans. So tell us a little bit, as comfortable as you feel, about some of the things that you kind of dealt with and where you kind of started to see your issues coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing, first and foremost, I'm going to lead off with this, and I think it's the most important thing is that with mental health, I am going to be an open book for the podcast as much time allows, just because I think the biggest problem is we don't talk about it enough. And whenever we don't talk about it, it doesn't get addressed, or other people maybe don't feel comfortable discussing it themselves. So I will be an open book, like I said, as much as I possibly can for this segment. So if we're looking at mental health overarching for me within my career, military-wise, I think it really kind of started for me as a young medic, not having any sort of trauma experience or any sort of real experience just from seeing people on the worst day of their life, right? That first introduction, and I'm sure Ben can attest to this as well, that first you never forget that first like critical patient. And for me, that was back before I was an AGR soldier, so like an active guard soldier. I was an M-Day soldier, so 1 week in a month, and I think I was only 3 months in. I'm sitting on a gun line, and my platoon sergeant told me, "Hey, it's going to be pretty standard, easy day for you. Just sit out there and take care of guys, and don't let them ride you too hard," because I was a brand new medic to the Army.
Right.
So we're sitting out there, and 8 o'clock at night, we're packing up and getting ready to go back to the barracks. And all of a sudden, I start hearing people just screaming medic. And I grab my bag and I start walking down, because I've always just wanted to present myself as, composed whenever I hear that, because I never wanted to give off the perception that I was panicked or I was nervous. So I'm, strolling down this hill where my ambulance was sitting over watching the gun line, and people are just telling me I have to move. And I go flying down this hill. I come around an LMTV, which is a big truck for your listeners that might not be familiar with the military. And there is a soldier who I was kind of having some banter with back and forth earlier in the day. He wasn't feeling well, and he was an older gentleman, and he is just he's down, bleeding from his head. So right away, brand new medic, I have tunnel vision on his head, but thank goodness the training that I got. As much as I was focused on the head, my body still just went and did exactly what it was supposed to do, and I found absent pulses on him. So then at that point, I knew it was a cardiac issue. So I switched over to that and doing CPR. And it, I didn't know anything. I knew nothing. I didn't know how long was like standard to be working on somebody. So I just went to work, and we're waiting for range control. This is back before like AEDs were really mandatory on the post that I work on for medics out on ranges. So I didn't have an AED. All I have are my hands and my bag, and there was nothing in my bag that was going to help me. I didn't even have a pocket mask on me, just because, once again, I wasn't outfitted for the job. So fast forward, I work on the patient for 30 minutes. Like I said, this is a guy, I have an entire gun line circling around me, just watching me. And the pressure was extraordinary.
Sure.
But I did in the moment, I didn't realize that. I just, my biggest thought was, I'm not letting a fellow soldier die during a training event on a gun line, and we're all supposed to be going home tomorrow. That was my biggest thought, was just get this guy to a hospital so that way they can do the life-saving things that they need to do, keep him alive, just get him back. 32 minutes exactly. I performed CPR until an AED comes out. We shocked him twice, got him on, got a rhythm back, and then got him on an ambulance that we had to meet out on a hardball road, because the ambulance would not come down the dirt path that we took. And then I rode to the hospital with him, and the rest is kind of history. So as I've gotten older in my career, I kind of realized how significant that was and how much that really affected me and the pressure I put on myself to perform. Because, like I said, I was a trained medic, but I wasn't an experienced medic. And I got a save, and I did something remarkable. Like the doctors were stunned whenever we got to the hospital. They didn't believe that I actually had worked on that soldier for 32 minutes.
Wow.
And we got him back with no brain damage. It was just incredible. He was coherent whenever we got him back.
That's amazing.
So once again, yeah. So fast forward to any other time later on in my career where it was time for me to perform, the amount of pressure that I would put on myself in those moments to be perfect, that was kind of where it started. And then I did military funeral honors as a full-time job, sometimes doing 4 or 5 funerals a single day, just putting vets into the ground, or and then presenting a flag to the next of kin. So all these things, they're not combat related early on in my career, but they still weigh heavily. And that's something I really want to push on too, is just because you don't have necessarily the combat experience, bullets whizzing by you or mortar or rockets coming in on the fob you're sitting on, that does not mean that something traumatic in your life did not happen that affected you. And that moment affected me for the remainder of my career. And as far as whenever it comes time for me to be a medic, I have to perform to perfection. Otherwise, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to the soldiers. And you expect that from everybody, but the pressure was enough to weigh on me mentally.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So like I said, it's not me sitting there saying I wish that I would approach things half-heartedly whenever it came to, treating somebody in a medical standpoint. No, it was just, I put so much pressure on myself that it actually drove me to anxiety and things of that nature.
I was kind of getting that. It's like, so, you did exactly what you were trained to do. You did it at a high level, which is what we want from our service people. But at the same time, you kind of put this unrealistic expectation on yourself, because the reality is that you can lose people, right? Especially being in that field and what you guys are doing. And so you put this undue pressure on yourself to maybe be, better than perfect. And it causes you to create some, anxiety and stress. And Ben, I'm sure that resonates with you as well.
Almost certainly, because we were considered we were the doctors in the field.
Yes.
They called us doc, and they looked at us like that, and we had a expectancy. We were expected to perform professionally. So I can understand that pressure that Darrin was just talking about, especially being someone who has never been faced with that scenario.
Yeah, right out of the gate.
Situations like that too.
Yeah,
and it was like an out of body experience with me.
Yeah, right out of the gate. I'm sure it was a incredible experience right out of the gate. You're thinking, man, couldn't I have got like a jammed a jammed finger, something easy on my first go round?
I will tell you what it did is the expectation that it set for me going forward was bad things are going to happen. So when they do happen, I really hope it's me that's present for it. And not saying that I didn't put trust in other people, especially as I became, a senior medic and, a sergeant and then even up to a platoon sergeant on my deployment that we just went on back in 2020 and 2021. It's just I don't want to say it's arrogance, but it's a confidence level in yourself because you have performed. But once again, you're putting so much expectation on yourself that you get overwhelmed, you get anxious, you get driven to think that you are not capable of making a mistake. And if you do, you're going to be viewed lesser than what you hold for yourself. And that was always the biggest thing, not necessarily caring what other people think, but in all honesty, caring what other people think, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. And we do that as humans a lot of times. And certainly, being in the military and transitioning even from that out of, service, you still kind of carry this expectation, I suppose, weight that goes with us everywhere. And so I'm reading through your a little bit your bio here, Dan, and said, a lot of the anxiety and the stress and the pressure you kind of started to, and this is a big focus point for the podcast, is you started turning towards self-medicating, right? So with alcohol or whatever the case might be, and that's where many veterans find themselves. That's where Ben found himself as well.
Yeah, it's easy to obtain. Whenever I first started having a problem, right? It wasn't a problem at that time in my mind.
Sure.
But now identifying it was a problem, you make excuses. Oh, I'm just going out with the boys. Oh, I'm going to go watch football on Sunday. Oh, I need to unwind from a long day at work. And you're never addressing the problem, right? You're stacking boxes all nice like it's Tetris. And then I would drink myself to a point where, you would get drunk and then you would get home and then you go to bed and then you wake up the next morning and I never addressed my problems. So these nice boxes of all these problems that I had and all these worries and all these fears, I stacked them up all nice. And then I would get drunk and then they would be all over the floor the next day. And then you have to, now, instead of just facing one problem at a time, you're overwhelmed with a plethora of them and you don't know where to start, which that makes more anxiety. Then you start to get panicked. And whenever I say you, once again, I'm referring just to myself here. I would get panicked and then my panic would manifest into medical problems that I thought I had. I was having a heart attack. I thought I was having a stroke because my body was having physical reactions to my stress and my anxiety.
Oh yeah, the anxiety will do that. Panic attack is no joke.
Oh, even up until 5 months ago, I was having panic attacks daily, sometimes 4 times a day, lasting anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, where I just thought, this is it. This is the impending doom that everybody talks about. Your brain tells you that you're okay and you're fine, but your body physically does not feel like it is okay.
Yeah.
And then eventually your brain just starts saying, okay, well, maybe you're not fine. Well, okay, we're not okay. And then all logical thinking just goes out the window. So at the time, whenever I was having these panic attacks and the physical manifestations would come about, I knew that they weren't real. And like in my heart, I knew, hey, I'm not having a heart attack. I'm young. I take care of myself. I eat good. I'm not having a stroke. I'm not, my aorta didn't rupture. These off the wall thoughts that I had.
Yeah. So what the hell's wrong with me? Right. Yeah.
Right. So I just knew, and I knew what it was too. I knew I was anxious. I knew I was having panic attacks. And the biggest fear I had, and this is stemming back a few months ago, whenever I really knew, I was in therapy for the last couple years. I've been doing really well. I've been sober. So everything has been going great. And then all of a sudden I was just overwhelmed. I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know if it was my business. I didn't know if it was my military career getting ready to, I'm getting, near the tail end of my career. I didn't know if it was the birth of my first child. All the things compounding. And then I didn't know how to address them. So, but I still stayed away from the self-medication. I stayed away. But the one thing I refused to do was go on oral medications like an SSRI, because I had heard horror stories, or I believed the information that I received from others who were like, oh, I took Xanax for 3 months and it made it even worse. And there was already a stigma placed on medicine to me, even though I work in that field. But once again, I'm not a doctor. So, sometimes it's easy to believe testimonial that you hear from other people, especially people that you trust. So that's why I made sure, hey, I'm not doing this. And then eventually I was hit with reality and a heavy dose of it back in July of just this year, where I went to the hospital 5 times in 1 month with these manifested problems and begging doctors. And they would tell me the same thing every single time at the ER. You need to see a therapist. Well, I am seeing a therapist. Okay, well, you need to go on a medication maybe. Okay, well, let's go. I'm ready. I'm ready. Let's accept this.
Right.
And then they're like, well, we can't do that. This is an emergency department. Schedule an appointment with your primary care doctor. And then I would put it off because I would have a good day. And then I wouldn't have a good day. And then it was right back to it and the same cycle. And it wasn't until finally I had a breakdown. I reached out to the behavioral health department at the medical treatment facility that I go to. And I just told them, hey, look, I'm not able to handle this on my own at this point. My traditional methods like meditation, yoga, going for walks, they're not working. I'm not at that point where I want to get back on drinking, but I am, and and I feel like I'm getting ready to go back to all the ways that were unhealthy for me to manage my stress. And they said, you need to come in right now. And I did. I left work early. My command team understood. They were very supportive of me. So I left and I sat down with this doctor. I won't say his name just for, the purposes of it, but he talked to me. And I think that's really what it was, is that I needed somebody to understand or have me feel like they understood what I was going through. Because, whenever I went to the ER, it was, well, we're focusing on the problems that you're complaining of, even though we know, and the doctors were always very upfront about that. Like, hey, we're going to focus on what you're complaining about, but we know that the underlying cause is stress and anxiety, and you need to get that handled. But they wouldn't handle it. And I just kind of felt like I was being dismissed. So this doctor, we sat down up front, he said, well, how much time do you think we need? And I was like, how much time do I have? And he said, well, I'm only supposed to 20-minute increments. I said, you might need to clear your schedule because we need to talk. And we talked about all the things. And at the end of it, he just said, we're going to get you taken care of. And like I said, I felt like him and even the nurse that was in the room with me, they understood what I was going through, and they did not make me feel guilty for feeling that. And they made me feel like it was okay, and they normalized it for me. So that made me even more comfortable to go on medication and go on an SSRI and an anti-anxiety medicine. And I'm not joking, Mark. After I started taking that medication 2 weeks later, the most normal I have ever felt in probably the last 4 years of my life.
Well, and that's a powerful story, Darrin, and that's really where, the focus of our podcast is too, because sometimes it is trying to figure out and struggle through the muck of our own brains to get to accept whatever, needs to happen. Right? You were seeking these different things. You were going through different, channels trying to get stuff done. You got off the booze and so on and so forth, but you were still having the problems. And so eventually I think you've got to kind of accept that you need help. And I think that's the biggest struggle for many veterans is, I know I need help, but how do I truly accept it? I mean, you could break it down to something as simple as quitting cigarettes. You know it's bad for you, but until you're ready to truly quit, you're never going to quit,
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And that kind of leads into like one of the biggest things right now that I'm doing is through my company, Barracks Baristas Coffee Company, for the entire month of November, we were donating 10% of all of our proceeds to the Headstrong Project, which I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the Headstrong Project, for any veteran out there listening, fantastic organization that provides free mental health, stigma-free, and pressure-free mental health treatment to veterans. All you have to do is just go on their website. You can, input your information. Within 24 hours, you're having somebody call you. And the beauty of the Headstrong Project, and this is not me bagging on the VA system or even military treatment facilities by any means. They're overwhelmed just like anywhere else.
Sure.
The Headstrong Project, it moves very quickly because this is what they specialize in. So they move very, very quickly, and it's very customizable. I think the biggest problem with me whenever I finally accepted going to therapy was the first therapist, great person, not good for me though. It was not a good match. So
that's important. Yeah, that's hugely important. That's a lot of what, Ben, you guys do at CompureCore and at Voice and Vision is matching people up with the right fit for them, right? Because Darrin, part of it is in what the team does here that produce this podcast and put it on is putting somebody with a similar personality who can walk the walk, talk the talk, and it does help. It does make a huge impact.
Absolutely,
yeah, because
it does.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
I said it actually makes a big difference because you have veterans out there who are going through, just like you said, Darrin, some civilians don't understand. Some people don't understand what a veteran's been through until you got to the right people. So that's what we try to do is kind of, head that off in the beginning, even before it gets to the hospital setting.
Yeah.
We can walk with somebody to give them support that they need.
Yeah, for sure. And Darrin, so you guys are the Headstrong Project, by the way, folks, we'll put a link to it in the show descriptions. It's the headstrongproject.org. If you'd like to check that out, the headstrongproject.org. And of course, we're going to have Darrin's link to his company as well as barracksbaristas.com. So that's what you guys are focusing on. So with your, and we'd love to have you back, by the way, because we're getting tight on time here, but this has been a great podcast. So is that kind of what a secondary focus, I suppose, of the coffee company is also kind of giving back because you've been through this journey?
Yeah. So the biggest thing with Barracks Baristas was, as we were really kind of setting it up, we said, well, there's like I said at the beginning of the podcast, was the veteran coffee companies are a dime a dozen. So what can we really do to maybe separate ourselves and what really matters to us, right? Yes, it's about making money for ourselves on a personal level, but at the same time, we're business owners. I want to make sure that we're always giving back what we don't need to something that matters to us. And both my partner and I, Jerry and we're both humongous advocates for mental health and also just our local community outreach. So that's been the focal point of our company is community outreach and mental health resources, not even just specifically for veterans, because I think it takes an entire country, right, to make it go. And I know that it's not just veterans, but our main focus, is that veteran community because we understand it. We come from it. We live that.
Yeah.
Just mental health resources.
Yeah. It makes total sense. And I agree with you. I mean, and obviously talking about it, is something we have to do more of, which again is why we do the podcast. It's why we put this on. And so I know we're up against the time here. And like I said, we'd love to even have you come back on and talk more about with us about this because it is so important. And your story will resonate with a lot of people who listen to this. So if you had kind of a final wrap up, kind of a final thought, we'll go old Jerry Springer here. What's your final thought? Back whenever the show actually, was actually pretty decent and not just the crazy things that they used to do on Jerry Springer, but sharing with others. Hey, look, no matter what walk of life you're in the military, you can be affected by PTSD. It's trying to figure out how do I ask for the help or how do I even receive the help? Asking it is gotten easier and easier. There's so many resources out there, but are you ready to accept it? What's your takeaway?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is, as you said, you have to be ready because you can go to a therapy appointment and sit there and not really take away or try to implement the advice that's given to you in your life. And you're just going through the motion because you think that's what you're supposed to do. That's why it is so important to first and foremost, it is okay to not be okay. First and foremost, it for everybody out there listening, if you've ever been through something, it is okay to not be okay. Where it becomes a problem is whenever it starts to affect your life and the people around you that care about you. So don't let it get to that point. Even no matter how small, no matter how big a problem is, it can always be fixed. It just, like anything, it takes time. And you have to be willing to put in that time, right? You don't go to the gym one time and think that you're going to all of a sudden have the physique of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right. It just won't happen. So you have to put in that work. You have to put in that time. And just like anything, in your body or on your body, your brain needs exercised and it needs taken care of. You go to the hospital, you go to an orthopedic surgeon for broken bones and things of that nature. You need to take care of your brain as well. And that is my biggest takeaway is that identify when you're not okay, have safe outlets to work through your problems, and don't let them pile up, because the second that you start to pile up your problems, you don't address them, you're going to go down that path of finding unconventional ways or the self-medication to deal with it. And then once again, you're never taking care of the problem. You're not actually addressing it. So find somebody you trust, whether it's a spouse, a family member, a friend, a therapist, a counselor, whatever the case is, and somebody who is not going to pass judgment on you. That's why I really enjoy counselors and therapists, because they're very unbiased. They're not my friends who are going to tell me what I want to hear. Yeah. And they're not going to be my family who are way too honest with me and then get me flustered or make me feel guilty for feeling the way that I do. So just, if you need the help, please reach out. The world is a much better place with all of you in it. I promise you that, and no problem is so bad that you can't work through it.
Yeah. Well said. Very, very well said. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah. Great stuff. Thanks so much for being here, Darrin. We certainly appreciate it. Darrin Henry, everybody, from barracksbaristas.com. We'll have all that information in the show links. Thanks so much for your time on Untold Valor. We always appreciate it. Make sure that if you need help, you are using the resources that we provide each and every week in the show notes. Reach out to someone and do something for your mental health and your physical health. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform app you like using, and share it with others who might benefit from the message, other veterans, family members, loved ones, whatever the case is, so that we can help as many folks, or at least get their story out to as many people as possible. Again, thank you so much for being on Untold Valor, Veterans Recovery in Action. Thank you, Darrin. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Ben. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And we'll see you next time here on Untold Valor, Veterans Recovery in Action. You've been listening to Untold Valor by Voice and Vision. We hope you found the information and resources discussed today helpful. As always, thank you for listening and for your support. Remember to stay connected with us through our various social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Don't forget to visit the website, voiceandvisioninc.org. That's voiceandvisioninc.org, where you can sign up for our blog and find free resources and information on upcoming events, webinars, workshops, and get support. You can also access our free help and hope guide for individuals and families struggling with substance use and addiction. If someone you know is struggling, please reach out for help because you and your life matter. Remember, the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available to you at any time by dialing 988. We are all ambassadors of hope and recovery, and if you want to share your story, please contact us. Compeer Corps is also looking for veteran mentor volunteers and veteran participants. To find out more information about Compeer Corps, please call 610-541-0790. That's 610-541-0790. You can find all the links and contact information for the resources mentioned on today's episode by checking the description and the show notes section of your app. Thank you again for tuning in and for your support. Until next time, this has been Untold Valor.